So this brings us to the end of the course. We're going to take a look at the death of William of Normandy and what that means for his sons and his succession. First of all, let's take a look back at the life of William of Normandy and establish what type of person he was. Well, he was stern. William was 8 years old when he became the Duke of Normandy, meaning he had to mature and grow up quickly and survive assassination attempts. He's had to grow up and turn into a warrior very, very quickly. He's constantly being raided by other lands around Normandy at a very young age, and he has to learn to handle himself and look after himself very quickly. He's also brutal, constantly at war ever since the age of 8 years old, surrounded by rivals, meaning he built leadership and military skills. He is a military expert. Obviously, he's been learning since the age of 8. You also see this brutality with the harrying of the North, don't you? He was willing to kill if required, for example, the harrying of the North. He was greedy, or full of avarice, A-V-A-R-I-C-E, avarice, desire to obtain and own everything. William was avaricious and was obsessed with money. He had a desire to own everything, as shown by his land reforms, inserting himself into every single land transaction so that he got a percentage of it, or he benefited from it in some way through loyalty or finances. He amassed more power arguably than any king before him, and one of the most powerful kings of all time. And this comes from sheer greed to own everything. He is incredibly religious as well, very religious or pious, and used the church to show the legitimacy of his claim. Remember, you get the Bayeux Tapestry, the idea of Harold Godwinson being an oath breaker, the arrow in the eye, constant ceremonies taking place during religious festivals such as Easter and Christmas, even being crowned on Christmas Day. He promoted the church's reforms across Anglo-Saxon England. Remember, when he took over, the English church was very backwards, the Anglo-Saxon church was backwards. So he reformed it alongside Lanfranc and repented for his brutality, such as the harrying of the North, on his deathbed. William's piety is shown by the fact he allowed Lanfranc to reform the church so extensively. He was also a devoted husband. He was devoted to his wife Matilda and trusted her to act as a regent in Normandy. It was said that he wept for days when she died, and this shows a more caring side to William. His devotion to his wife is also apparent when you get to William's relationship with his son Robert, in which they have a big argument and Matilda kind of quells the feud between the two. So we'll come to that later on. William's death then, 1087. William was thrown against his horse saddle whilst attacking another castle, and this caused many internal injuries. He lingers on his deathbed for days and weeks until eventually dying on September the 9th. The fact that it takes him so long to die meant he had time to put things in order, or try to put things in order for his succession. His death creates a power vacuum and panic. Many barons, as soon as they hear that William is dying, barons run away to secure their castles and protect themselves against theft or people trying to steal their land. The servants around William stole everything they could, including clothes. This shows complete disrespect, doesn't it? At William's funeral, because of this injury to his stomach, it's grown and grown and grown, and at his funeral his bloated body was squashed into a stone tomb, which resulted in it bursting and sort of like exploding out across the floor. This led to a foul-smelling odour. The people had to leave the cathedral, and these problems, the reason this is significant is because these problems were seen as a sign that God had not forgiven William for some of his brutal actions. So, now that William's dead, who's going to take over the country? Well, he's got two sons. He's got his eldest son, Robert, and his younger son, William. Let's take a look at the relationship he has with these two, because then that will reveal to us the succession. Him and his eldest son, Robert, do not get on. They've got a very difficult relationship in general. You've seen this throughout the course. You see it with William FitzOsbern's descendants wanting to have as much power as their father had. This is a constant theme where the sons of Norman leaders want to have the same power as dad and want to take over from their dad quickly. Anyway, William and Robert therefore had a very difficult relationship. William doesn't think Robert is ready to take control or mature enough to take control, and Robert desperately wants to take control. This comes to a head in 1077, when, following a prank in which Robert's younger brothers, William and Henry, dumped water on his head. Robert gets angry about this. He sees this as disrespect because they are literally above him, pouring things down onto him. So he becomes angry about this and starts a real fight with his brothers, and William breaks up the fight and sort of gets angry at Robert for being so aggressive about it, rather than punishing the ones who poured water on his head. Angry that his father did not punish his brother sufficiently, Robert and his followers, or his men, tried to take control of Rouen Castle, then fled from William, who wanted them arrested. King Philip of France, who was William's enemy, installed Robert in a castle on Normandy's borders, from which Robert repeatedly launched raids, forcing William to raise an army against him. So now we've got father and son at war with each other. Probably here what Robert's trying to do is just prove himself as a military leader who can take control. At a battle in 1079, Robert and William end up fighting directly against each other. Robert knocks William off his horse and wounding him. With William lying defenceless on the ground, Robert gave his father his own horse and ordered him to retreat from the battle. This was a huge humiliation for William. Effectively, he says, "Off you go, old man. Let me take care of things." Mother Matilda, however, when I say mother, that's Robert's mother, that's William's wife, Matilda. She saves the day and helps repair the relationship between the two. I say repair, call a truce on the feud. Matilda organised a reconciliation between William and Robert during Easter of 1080. William restored Robert as his chosen heir for Normandy. Very important, because he's not the heir to the English throne. Remember, William has more than one kingdom, Normandy and England, and he also has more than one son. So William makes Robert his chosen heir for Normandy. The events of Robert's revolt against William between 1077 and 1080 point to a key problem for medieval kings: princes who wanted power before their fathers were ready to let go of it. So we've established now that Robert is the heir for Normandy. What does that mean for England? Well, you get William's favoured son, William Rufus, named because of his red hair. Rufus as in red hair. William Rufus will become William II when he takes over England. William wanted only his favourite son, William Rufus, to be the King of England. However, what he does say is, because he's committed such brutal acts during his time as king, William is full of repentance. So he says, yes, I want it to be William Rufus who takes over England, but I will leave it up to God. So effectively what he says here, William, is, I want William Rufus to take over, but if you want to fight him for it and let God choose, then that's fine as well. So I'm sure William Rufus, hearing this, he's like, oh, cheers, nice one, Dad. So you give me the kingdom, but now I have to fight people off for it. So William II becomes King of England. However, obviously, his big brother Robert doesn't just accept this, because traditionally, Norman tradition states that the eldest son would inherit all of his father's lands. So that's why Robert is particularly unhappy about this. He feels entitled to England. Robert thought it was unfair because he was the eldest and he should inherit both of his father's kingdoms. And also he simply thinks, well, I'm a better military leader than you. I'm just going to take it then, because I have father's blessing, and I'm going to let God choose. What does this lead to then? Well, guess who comes back into our story? Bishop Odo. Because as William lays dying in 1087 on his deathbed, he pardons Odo, who, if you remember, had been in prison up until this point. William pardons Odo and lets him out of prison. So Robert is then supported by his uncles Odo and Robert of Mortain. And the reasons for this revolt of Robert and Odo is obviously, one, he felt entitled to inheriting all the land. The other reasons being that Normans would have preferred one lord for both Normandy and England, because what if I'm a Norman and I own land in Normandy and England, and those two kingdoms now have different kings? I'm having to pay two lots of tax, I'm having to share loyalty with two lots of people, I'm having to try and keep two different kings happy all the time. I would much prefer one person in charge, and I just have to keep that one person happy. So, in 1087, Bishop Odo had been freed from prison, and in 1088 he leads a rebellion against William II in England. This is in support of Robert's claim to be the King of England. Another reason why he rebels or revolts is that ambitious men such as Odo believe that Robert would be a king they could more easily control. He thinks, oh, if we get Robert in charge, we can make him do whatever we want and he will be good for us. William Rufus, however, was much more like his father and they feared he might work to reduce the power of the barons. So effectively they're thinking, if we let Robert be in charge, he'll let us get away with anything, whereas William Rufus will try and reduce our power, so we'd rather Robert was in charge. Odo's brother, Robert of Mortain, joined the revolt. The brothers managed to get control of large areas of the south of England, including some heavily fortified castles, and other rebellions broke out in 1088, inspired by the fact that Odo and Robert were rebelling. However, the majority of Norman aristocrats and the English population were against Odo's rebellion. Now, hang on a minute. Why would the Anglo-Saxons be against Odo's rebellion? Oh, yeah, because when he ran the country as regent, he was brutal, he was corrupt, he was tyrannical. So, of course, then the Anglo-Saxons aren't going to support his rebellion. Odo and Robert, therefore, were forced to take refuge in Pevensey Castle. William Rufus lay siege to the castle for 6 weeks, and help never arrived from Robert. Odo was forced to surrender. He was stripped of his English titles, land, and exiled. The rebellion had failed, and ultimately it seems that by this point the Anglo-Saxons have accepted Normans in charge. William II promises to be a just and fair king to the English, says, I will get rid of the forest laws and all this, but he goes back on all his promises.